Good afternoon, everybody. It's nice to see you at the National Charter Schools Conference. I'm glad to get to spend a little bit of time talking to you about the thing I love best, the craft of teaching, the most important job in the world, even in these strange times. My presentation is called Three Things to Get Right in Remote Teaching or in the Remote Classroom because, suddenly we're all online teachers. And so I thought I'd just talk to you a little bit about some of the things that my team and I have learned in studying teachers. In March, like you, we were caught a bit off guard by the change to this online world. And we started watching teachers, as much video as we could of teachers online to try and determine what they were doing that seemed really helpful and really good. So hopefully this will be helpful. I'll show you video of actual teachers in actual classrooms, and that will give you lots of things that you can take away and borrow and steal for your own classrooms. And hopefully, as a side note, this will be coming out in a book at the end of August called Teaching in the Online Classroom, Surviving and Thriving in the New Normal. And I, like you, I'm here at home in the new normal, which means there's a decent chance that someone comes into the background of my screen here, either naked or playing a trombone in the next couple of minutes. So let's get going while the going is good. One other interesting note from the new normal is I have a picture of a backseat here because in one of the videos that I'm going to show you later today, a student answers a question in her class from the backseat of her family car. She does a great job, and that reminds us that if they can do it, if one of our students can answer a question from the backseat of her car, then we can do this too. Some things, I'm happy to say, have not changed in this new online world that we're teaching in. And one of those things is one of the key challenges of teaching, which is checking for understanding. The idea, as the eminent basketball coach John Wooden put it, that the essence of teaching is knowing the difference between I taught it and they learned it. And that's critical in a bricks and mortar classroom. And it's critical online, even if it's a little bit harder, because online, we're trying to glimpse what our students are doing and whether they're learning as if through a tiny keyhole of the screen. So how do we do that, and how do we do that well? Well, I thought I'd start by showing you a video that I thought was a really great example of this. This is Eric Snyder. He teaches at an Achievement First school in Rhode Island. And in this video, he is reading a really great novel, One Crazy Summer by Rita Williams Garcia. And as the video starts, you're actually going to hear him playing the audiobook for his students through his computer. And then there's going to be a synchronous lesson where they're all together and they're all discussing the book. And you'll see that he's built his lesson and designed it so that he can constantly gather data on what they know and what they don't know and how they're doing. So I'm going to start the video. You'll hear the book on tape voice reading. Then you'll see Eric come on the screen and you'll see his students go to work. As you watch it, if you'd like to, I think it's always nice to just share out the things you're seeing that are useful and valuable and that you could adapt and use in your classroom. And so at the bottom of the screen, there is a group chat icon. It's a small blue box that looks like a quote box. And if you feel like it and you feel inspired, it'd be great. And it would helpful to others and hopefully helpful to you, and honor Eric if you wanted to just chat things that you see in the video that you think are helpful. So here's Eric.
The idea of radio announcements, the Black Panther newspaper, and word of mouth hadn't entered my mind. If only Cecile could see what we'd done. And Pa and Big Ma.
Okay, we're going to pause here. Quick check. Question number 1. How does Delphine feel? Highlight your answer choice, then chat me. But then number 2, underline at least one detail in the text that supports your answer to number 1. Note, if you don't have that physical copy, you can type it below. I'm going to cold call for a scholar with evidence in 1 minute. Question 1, how does Delphine feel? Question 2, what evidence supports it? 1 minute, go. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Elsie. Armani, I appreciate the message. Thanks, buddy. That's above and beyond. Thanks, Yazi. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Okay, before we share out number 1, we're actually pretty split, and it looks like we might be a little bit confused around how Delphine feels. And I want to take you back to the text. And I want to zoom in up here a lot of scholars said that when Delphine comes to the rally, she feels ashamed. I want to zoom in on the sentence where the word ashamed comes up here. It says, I feel ashamed of the pride I take in ironing a crease extra sharp. Ironing a sharp crease is a job well done. In this sentence, is Delphine saying she feels ashamed of being at the rally? She's talking about ironing to make sure her clothes are sharp, and like she takes pride in these little tall details. If I keep reading, bringing people to this rally was magic that had you soaring above the trees. It certainly was worth marching up to the no-sayers. I just want a quick recheck and come back to our classwork question here. Can you send me again? What's the answer to number 1? Everybody chat me the letter. Thanks, Amari. Thanks, Jaden. Thanks, Alma. Thanks, Yasmin. Thanks, George. Thanks, Solari. Thanks, Christian. Interesting. All right, so we're up to probably 70% of us have this correct, but there's still a little bit of confusion. So rather than a cold call, because this has been challenging, I'll actually take hands. Can someone explain to us what's the best answer to number 1? I'm looking for blue hands. Awesome. Thank you, James. Thanks, George. Thanks, Jaylee. Wow, ton of hands here. I appreciate it. Let's go, Solari. What's the best answer and why?
A, because Delphine 3. If only Cecile could see what we've done. And Pa and Big Mom.
Say more.
I think since she didn't have a really strong relationship with Sophia, she feels proud of what she's done, that she thinks that Sophia will be proud of her of what she's done. And I think she has a little confidence that she'll she'll make Sophia proud and bring Pa and bring Ma.
1, thank you for your participation, and 2, you're 100% correct. Solari, great choice of evidence here. So the fact that in this moment she wishes Cecile could be there to see this shows that Delphine feels proud. She's so proud that she wishes her mom could see it. I'm going to move us here. So the correct answer then to number 1 is A. She feels proud.
Great. So hopefully you were as inspired by that video as I was. Solari, I especially love just answering that great question from the back seat of her parents' car. And so if Solari can do it, so can we. I just wanted to call out a couple of things that people said in the chat. Thank you to all of you who weighed in. Jessica, you mentioned how he acknowledges every student and how so many students in that class feel seen when they do their work and when they engage in learning. They're far away from us, and the more we can make students feel seen and heard and understood, so powerful. And then Jeanette and Elizabeth, you talked about this, just the feedback loop and how fast it is here, and how they read, they send their thoughts back to him, he responds right away. And so the tools do exist for us to be able to do this kind of checking for understanding, and also to connect with students constantly. And that's something we should always be thinking about. At the end of this presentation, I'll talk about a phrase that I love called dissolve the screen, which is one of the things that we just have to do if we want to reach kids better online, and it's making them feel the connection between us around academic work. Here are a couple of other things that I'm sure you saw and mentioned that we just love from this video. That he systematically gathers and assesses data in real time. He really designs his lesson to be able to do that. Maybe that question would have been better in the bricks and mortar classroom as an open response question. But the multiple choice really lets him gather data very quickly, and he responds to it. He even changes his teaching, and he says, I was going to cold call you, but now I'm not. We need to go deep here. He's also really intentional about building a culture of error, which makes it safe to expose what you don't know, and to acknowledge when you get something wrong, because we're going to study it and it's going to be interesting, and that's a good thing. So he says when they get it wrong, when some students still don't get the answer, he says, we're pretty split. It looks like we might be a little bit confused, but in a really normalizing tone of voice, like, that's okay, that's what we do, right? That's what learning is. He lets students know he might cold call so that they know they're accountable and involved in a part of the lesson, right? So they know they're going to be involved and they can't be checked out online. The whole world is a click away when they're online, and so we need to help students feel lovingly accountable. Then all those acknowledgments. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Juwan. Narrating the positive, making students feel seen. He does a quick recheck to make sure that they're making progress, and then again, Solari really inspires us. So there's lots to learn from that video, and hopefully you'll enjoy the other videos that we're able to look at just as much. Here's some of the things that we're going to talk about during the 45 minutes that we have together. The first one is checking for understanding, how important it is in remote teaching, and hopefully you took away some tools from watching Eric do his thing there. We'll see a couple of other videos that emphasize this idea as well. We'll also talk a little bit about socializing attention. Attention is the core of learning in any classroom. What you pay attention to is what you learn about. But it's times 10 important in an online classroom where students are used to being passive, they're used to being distracted. Well, I shouldn't even say students, people are used to being distracted and used to being passive in an online setting unless they're socialized to do otherwise. There's lots of research about the fact that you and me, never mind students, switch applications every 2 minutes when we're in an online setting. And so we're prone to distractibility, and we've got to fight against that. And then finally, as I mentioned, we'll talk a little bit about the idea of dissolving the screen and connecting with students. I thought I'd start by defining a couple of terms that I think are helpful, but that you're probably familiar with, and they are synchronous and asynchronous learning. They're the people who refer to them as the two types of online teaching. Synchronous learning is when we're all learning at the same time, but not in the same place. So this call, for most of you, is a synchronous experience. Ideally, if it was smaller, we'd all be chatting and engaging a little bit more directly, but even hearing your responses on the chat makes it a synchronous interactive experience. Asynchronous learning is when we're learning together, but neither in the same time nor in the same place. So if a webinar is a great example of synchronous learning, but pre-taped video, Khan Academy video, or a video that you make to explain how to add fractions with unlike denominators is asynchronous learning. We tend to think of these as either or, as kind of an either or case, but they aren't necessarily. So what I'd like to do now is I want to show you a couple of examples of asynchronous learning. And then I want to show you an example of what I think is like a hybrid that combines the best of asynchronous and synchronous learning. And then we'll look at a few examples of synchronous learning. So the first video I'm going to show you here is of George Bramley. And I may not show you the whole video, but George teaches high school in Leeds, England, of all places, and he's teaching a lesson here to his students on the Battle of Hastings. And I want you to steal whatever you want to from this video, but I'll tell you one thing that jumps out at me and a question that I think should be in all of our minds. His use of materials to track student thinking and to make them engaged and involved, even though it's an asynchronous video and he's recorded this in advance, are really, really sophisticated and excellent. And then after that, I'm going to show you a video of Joshua Humphrey. He's a teacher from KIPP St. Louis, and he also does a beautiful job of many of the things that George does and really connects with kids at the same time. And I think this is relevant because one question we might ask is, why make videos like this? Why not just use Khan Academy? Why bother making your own presentation of the content specific to your students? And hopefully some of the reasons for that will be clear after you watch these videos. So here's George first, and then I'll give you a second to just jot down some notes for yourself, and then we'll watch Joshua.
So I'm going to try something a little bit different. Basically, I'm going to try my best to give you a little bit of a normal lesson through video. There's a few bits I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to type some things into a document. There'll be times I ask you to pause me to give you some time to think about the question I've been posing to you. And there are also going to be a few bits where I ask you to make a few notes on paper. So if you haven't already, can you get some paper, ideally lined, but if you can only find plain, that's fine, or maybe an old exercise book, that'd work. And ideally 2 different colour pens. I've got black and purple here. If you haven't got those things with you now, can you just hit pause and come back when you've got them? Brilliant, right. So the first thing I need you to do for the lesson next is, just like you would in any other lesson, I'd like you to complete the starter quiz. So if you take a look here on the screen, you'll see you've got 12 different things taken from your knowledge organizer. I'd like you to read all of them, and I'd like you to write who you think they're talking about, what, where, or when are they talking about. Do this, please, on your scrap paper. Now, the first thing I'd like you to do is write down anything you already know about this inquiry question. Now, I would like you to write this information directly into the Word document attached to Google Classroom. So if you look in your Google Classroom Lesson 1, you'll see this document here, which I've got up on my screen. At the top, you've got the lesson inquiry. You've got what do you already know. And I'd like you to write in this box here, where it says write your answer, anything you already know about the inquiry question. So what we're going to learn about now are those actual events. Who would win and why would they win when they faced off against one another? Now, the way this is going to work is if you take a look at the screen now, I'm showing you your document again. What I'm going to do is give you some information. I'm going to tell you part of the story. As I'm telling you part of the story, I would like you to write notes here. So in this box number 1, what happened before, I'd like you to write notes on the story I'm telling you. Then, after that, I will pause, and I'll let you make a prediction about what you think will happen next. I'd like you to write in this box what you think will happen next. After that, I will then tell you what really happened, and again, I would like you to take notes in the third box across where it says what really happened. Step by step, we're going to do this. We're going to do it 6 times in total, bit by bit, teaching you the story of the battle we're looking at today. Now, it might be easier if you can play this video with me now on maybe a tablet or on your phone separately. Then on your computer, you can keep the Word document open to type directly into to submit at the end. Okay, so let's start at the start of the story. Can you be getting your cursor ready to take notes in box number 1, what happened before? So, at the start of the battle we're looking at, and if you take a look here at the map on the screen, so, as you might remember, at the start of September...
Just in the interest of time, I'm going to pause George there. I think we've gotten the gist of it. And feel free to keep chatting away at things that you've found valuable there, but I thought I'd just weigh in on a couple of things that people noticed that I thought were really helpful. One is just, Jeanette, thank you for your comment about, Andrea and Jeanette both, just starting off with the idea of like letting students know what they need to be successful. And pause, it's okay, you don't have to run this video through straight. This whole endeavor of online learning is new to students. They have often spent years in bricks and mortar classrooms, and so they know you show up with a pencil and a piece of paper. It may not be as obvious to them that sitting at their kitchen table, possibly babysitting younger siblings or whatever they have also going on, that they that there are certain things that they need to be ready. And so he just does a really nice job of setting them up for success at the beginning. And then again, we see this powerful idea of pause points, which is just because it's an asynchronous video doesn't mean I can't ask students to be active. Pause and get your materials ready. Great. Now pause and jot down answers to these questions. As you might have guessed, he's going to collect the sheet that they're working on, the Google Sheet later, and so he'll be able to see their work. And so it really operates a lot like a real classroom. As Samantha just pointed out, his directions are so precise and clear, right? It's much easier to misunderstand a direction when you're far away from your teacher. And so just being really, really clear on what to do is important. Yes, it's true that students may not pause the video, but we want to make it as much of a habit and as clear that they should as possible. So thank you for your observations on George's video. Now I want to show you the beginning of Joshua Humphrey's class. This is a math class. And one of the things you'll notice is how much he makes an effort to echo the things that are familiar to students from a bricks and mortar classroom. So the experience just feels comfortable for them. Please keep chatting away your comments about things that you like about Joshua's class as I start this video now.
Today we're going to for translating verbal expressions. The objective is students will be able to translate a verbal expression into an algebraic expression. So you're given some words, and you got to translate it into an algebraic expression. And then it says students will be able to identify the number of terms in a polynomial or function and interpret the parts for the quantities they represent. So I'm going to give you this polynomial, and you got to tell me about all the parts. Okay? What do they mean? All right. Come on. First things first, just like in the other class, you all have a do now. So this video is about to pause, and I want you to put in your answers. Number 1, 2, 3, and then the stamp it is an open response. So I'm pausing right now.
Fantastic. Just a couple of points that I see people are starting to comment, but Renee is pointing out clear expectations at the beginning are crucial. I think when we're online, we want to signal to students that this is still class, it's still learning. And so I think Joshua does a really beautiful job there of greeting students warmly. There's a lot of smiling. He really, I almost have to remind myself that he's sitting alone at his kitchen table talking to a computer, because it doesn't feel like it. It feels like he's really talking to students who are in the room and with him. Andrea, his relaxed demeanor, it feels like you're connected to him. But it's a combination of that relaxed demeanor and also like, let's get down to work pretty quickly. 3 minutes. One of our theories is that 3 minutes into the lesson, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, kids should do something. So you're reminding them that this is an interactive, engaged endeavor. And so it's warm, it's gracious, but then we're right into the do now within 2 minutes of beginning this classroom. And of course, the do now is a routine that they know from their bricks and mortar classrooms. And so they know how to do it, and it makes them feel comfortable and familiar. So lots of beautiful things from both Joshua's and George's lesson. To the question of like, why not, if synchronous videos are going to be part of asynchronous videos are going to be part of the learning environment, why not just use Khan Academy? And I think the answer is twofold. One, there's task accountability, specific and targeted things for students to do. You show a Khan Academy video and no one says, jot down the notes here and send them to me. And as George does, jot down notes from the lesson here, make predictions here, different kinds of thinking, right? I can really tailor it to what my students need. And then the relationship is so powerful here. Really important to have your face visible. The smile that Joshua gives his students when he says the do now is really, it's beautiful and compelling. And so it allows you to build those connections at the same time. So thanks for your observation about those two asynchronous videos. Let's just step back for a second, and I thought we could just talk for a minute about synchronous versus asynchronous learning. Which one is better? Neither one is necessarily better. They have strengths and weaknesses. So what are their strengths and weaknesses? Well, synchronous learning is especially good for assessing student understanding live and in real time and seeing how they're reacting to content and to connecting from in a relational way. And asynchronous learning is probably, its strengths are depth of work. I can ask students to work on something for 10 minutes, which I can't really do quite as easily as I can in a synchronous learning setting. And I can allow for self-pacing. Kids can work at their own pace. The downsides of these two approaches, for synchronous learning, the downside is, well, one, fatigue. You've all been on the 90-minute Zoom call before, and you know what it's like. And if you think it's any different for kids on their 4th Zoom meeting of the day for 90 minutes, it's going to be rough. And it's hard to sustain attention and be sure that kids are writing when you ask them to write. It's hard to sustain attention and focus, and then we want to be able to get to real depth. The weaknesses of asynchronous learning are fatigue, again, looking passively at videos where you don't have any relationship building with your teacher or with your classmates. It can be isolating, and there's not much accountability or a check for understanding. We don't really know what students are doing. So it's worth thinking about how we could combine synchronous and asynchronous to create greater value. In other words, it may not be an either or choice. And if we do that well, hopefully we can both engage students in learning, but also make it as rigorous as we can. And that's really important. A recent study of what happened in the spring at a major school district in California found that on average, about 36% of middle and high school students participated in an average online lesson. And we just have to do better. So here's a model of what the synergies might look like between synchronous and asynchronous learning. let's say you've got a class and it goes from 9 to 10 and you are teaching, it's a math class and you're teaching kids how to add fractions with unlike denominators. You might start with a mini lesson. Could be maybe, let's say it's a synchronous lesson and you put a problem of the day up and you work through it together and you ask the kids to participate and how might you solve this problem? What's the first step you would do? Answer it in the chat. Great. Then maybe you cold call a couple of the kids and say, great. So if the first step is to do X, what did you get for that answer, please, David? So kids feel connected and involved, etc. But then maybe you have 3 problems that you want them to do. And instead of working through them all lockstep together, maybe you say, great, there are 3 more problems for you to do. Take the next 12 minutes for you. Take the next 12 minutes to do them on your own. Now you could say, and email them to me at the end of the day or submit them at the end of the day and just end the session there. But one of the things we found from watching great teachers online is you might actually continue the envelope of the synchronous instruction while students work asynchronously. In other words, you could say, solve those 3 problems on your own, but keep your camera on and I'll be here and chat me if you have any questions and I'll check in a few minutes to see if you have enough time. Good work, David. Nice work, Sarah. Good work, Adani. So as I do that, there's some loving, soft accountability there, right? Kids know that they have to be working. They can't just go off and tune out and do it later. And if they're struggling, they can come back to me and they can text me and they can get support from me. And then maybe at the end of the lesson, I say, great, let's come back together. Let's talk about those problems. Let's look at one and see how we did it and see whether we're all able to solve it. So I would describe that as sort of a synergy, hybrid between synchronous and asynchronous learning. And it can be a really powerful response to the either, so what sometimes seems like an either or choice. So I'm going to show you a video. This is Eric Snyder, who we saw before, Checking for Understanding, doing something like this, which is, I think, a hybrid between synchronous and asynchronous. Again, would love to ask you to go into the group chat and chat things that you like that Eric's doing here. It's the same lesson he's teaching. He's teaching One Crazy Summer again. Again, it's going to start with the book on tape, so you'll hear the voice of a professional narrator. But then you'll see he sends them off to do independent work in a really sets them up for it in a lovely way. After that, I've sort of spliced together 2 or 3 moments from that 10 minutes when they're working on their own. So just know when the screen dips to black for a moment, that's just a minute or 2 has passed, so you can see what he's doing over the course of the lesson. I think you'll really enjoy it. Here we go. Can't wait to see your comments. Talk to you afterwards.
I hadn't been paying attention because I was worried about Vanetta. But when Hirohito ran over, I said, that was really neat. Sister Pat pushed us to the stage and we marched out before all those people.
Okay, so this is the climactic moment. They're on stage. We've known this is coming for a while. What's going to happen when they perform? And why? Why does Fern keep barking? You're going to find out what happened and get ready for a plot twist as you now read on your own to the end of the chapter. You are going to pages 195 to 199. Then you're going to answer questions 4 to 6 in your classwork, then take your Socratic quiz. I'm going to adjust that timestamp. We're going to go to 125. Go read and enjoy. I see Adriel reading to page 199. I see you, bud. I see Armani A in the text reading to page 199. Can you shoot me a chat if you need more than 1 minute to finish up?
Great, and we'll just pause it there. So a couple of things you might have noticed here that are powerful. It starts with an engaging, all of us together synchronous lesson, reading aloud from the book, bringing the book to life, so important. Likely, he says, here's the big scene, the climactic scene. He kind of sets it up with a little bit of suspense, right? It's a really big deal. Now you get to read it on your own. And he also leaves them fresh, right? It's so important for us to emphasize reading. But he leaves them fresh. They listen to it read aloud for a little bit, and then they get to read it on their own. And so by shifting modalities in the way that they read, they'll read more with more attention and more enjoyment than they might otherwise. Then they go to this sort of mixed time on your own, but I'm still here. And you can hear them sort of reinforcing their effort and making them feel seen for doing their work, which is really important. but he's also able to put the directions up on the screen so he knows that kids won't forget him. Like you think you understand what the directions are, you go off to do a 10-minute task, and 5 minutes into it, you realize you're not totally sure what the question was. And so this sort of anytime directions in Eric's class are anytime directions, he gives a direction, he gives it verbally and on the screen, and it's yellow on the screen, and yellow means this is the directions. So you can see that happening. There's a little bit of communication. Tell me if you need more time. I see you working. I appreciate it. I love it when you work hard, gratitude for that. And then I didn't show this part, but at the end, he brings them back and they have another little discussion about what they did. So it's a really nice example, I think, of the mental fusion between synchronous and asynchronous and how they can work together to harvest and sustain student attention and focus a little bit more. One of the themes I would argue that we've been seeing in these videos, you saw in George's video and Joshua's video and here in Eric's video, is the idea of a pause point. Students need time when we're teaching them things to consolidate and use what they're learning. And we know that in the classroom, but it's challenging and different to do online. And it's just important to think throughout any online lesson, synchronous or asynchronous, we should stop every 3 to 5 minutes to ask students to do something, to build the habit of action. This is going to be an interactive, engaged environment. So we should stop as often as we can for these activities, but it's also worth thinking about 3 purposes that we can have for these pause points. And so one purpose might be just building attention and accountability. In this new context, online learning, the first goal is to build a culture that establishes the normalcy of active engagement, right? You're online, but it's still going to be active. You're going to be constantly doing tasks and talking to me and engaging in learning. Work is assigned and it gets done over and over. And so you can see the teachers here being like, pause. Here's an activity for you to do. Chat me your responses, right? We want to keep kids constantly engaged if we can. Second, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that, yes, kids are isolated, a little bit more isolated from us, but they're also isolated from each other. And so it's really important for them to see one another's ideas and be able to react to them. And my team and I call this formative thinking, which is in the classroom, we have discussions and we share students' answers with each other so they can learn from each other and interact with each other. And that's more challenging online, but it can be done. And I'll show you some more examples of that later, but even the discussion in the first Eric Snyder video is an example of it. One other example, honestly, that I've stolen from those teachers is just using the chat. If you've been using the chat during this session, I noticed several of you commenting on and responding to one another's answers about the video, and that's formative thinking, and you're connecting with each other, even though you're on your own and we're all isolated. And so that's something we can also use in the classroom. And again, time willing, I'll show you an example of that. And then finally, check for understanding. It's really important to use these pause points so we understand what's happening to students. Here's a mini clip that I want to show you. This is from Nikki Hernandez. She teaches Spanish in Standardsville, Virginia. And this is just the beginning of her Spanish class. And she does some really powerful things to help her around all these things about both check for understanding, but also building attention and accountability. And there are also things that they're tools that she's borrowed from her bricks and mortar classroom. So I think they'll look familiar. Pay attention in particular at the beginning. She's going to cold call a student. And if you'll notice, the student who she cold calls smiles. I'll just leave it at that. Here's the video.
All right, let's get started. So we're going to go through everything in Spanish, just like we always do in class. So here we go. La primera cosa, chicos, es que necesitamos llegar preparados para la clase. Así que la pregunta es, ¿qué necesito para la clase hoy? Okay, Abby, what does this question say?
What do you need for class today?
Okay, muy bien. Y chicos, número 1, la primera cosa que necesitamos es un cuaderno. Okay. Y Allison, ¿qué significa cuaderno?
Notebook.
Exacto. Okay. Necesitamos un cuaderno. Y Raquel, ¿qué significa lápiz o pluma?
Pencil and pen.
Okay, muy bien. Okay, chicos, les voy a dar un minuto para recoger un cuaderno y un lápiz o una pluma. Okay, un minuto. Okay, ¿todos estamos listos?
Sí.
Okay, vale. Continuaremos entonces. Okay, chicos, les voy a dar 3, minutos y 11 segundos, 3 minutos y 11 segundos para buscar las palabras en español de este vocabulario aquí en la pantalla. Por ejemplo, ¿cómo se dice? Y chicos, ¿pueden ver la pantalla? ¿Sí o no?
Sí.
Ok, vale, perfecto. Ok. Entonces, en sus cuadernos, quiero que ustedes escriban las definiciones de las palabras. Okay? So Chloe, give me a quick comprehension check. What are we doing right now for the next 3 minutes and 11 segundos?
We are looking up each of those vocabulary words and writing down the definitions.
Exactly. Where are we writing our definitions?
In our notebooks.
Perfecto. Vamos, chicos. Muy bien, chicos. El tiempo se acabó. ¿Quién necesita más tiempo? ¿Nadie? ¿Todo bien? Vale. Ok. Ok, chicos, entonces continuaremos con el vocabulario y vamos a empezar con Raquel.
Great. I'm going to pause it there. A couple things maybe you noticed about this video. One is there's that cold call that I called your attention to earlier, but actually Abby, Allison, Rachel twice, and Chloe all get cold called here, which just helps to keep them engaged. And you can see it makes Abby smiles when she gets cold called. This always reminds me of a story that my colleague Colleen told about the beginning of online learning for her daughter, who's in 3rd grade. And she was not having online learning. She just didn't like it. And then one day her teacher cold called her. And it changed everything because suddenly she realized my teacher sees me and she cares about me. She cares what's happening to me here in my home and working. And so it actually was deeply inclusive for her daughter. And I think you can see that here. It has a loving accountability and it makes students feel important to the endeavor of the classroom. One other thing that we see Nikki doing here, just in terms of the theme of checking for understanding, she's again got this hybrid model of like in the middle of a synchronous lesson, she sends kids off to an asynchronous task. They're doing their vocabulary words on their own for 3 minutes and 11 seconds. But right before that, she checks for understanding to make sure that they really understand the task, and she cold calls for that. And so the students, she knows at that time when students are working independently, it's going to be productive. And I didn't even need to show you the video after that to know, like the kids know that she's going to cold call coming out of it. And so it's important for them to do their best work, and they have an incentive to do their best work during that time. So lots of great things you might take from that video. I mentioned before the importance of formative thinking. So I just want to jump really quickly to one more video that I think shows a nice example of how you might do that. This is Susie Kim. She teaches in Brooklyn, and she's teaching The Jungle, Upton Sinclair's turn of the 20th century novel about abuses in the factory system in Chicago. And, it's a 120-year-old book with ornate, somewhat archaic language. It's hard to read and hard to understand. And so she's really built her lesson around both checking for understanding, but also students sharing ideas with each other. So she gives them the passage and she asks them to write a response to the passage on the screen. She's using a Google Sheet, but you could do this in the chat or some other way. And so 1, students can see what their peers are writing and respond to them. But 2, she can collect information very quickly. And she notices that they aren't understanding the book, especially. They aren't understanding the passage as well as they might. So she goes back and reteaches it. And then something really, really interesting happens at the end. I won't tell you what it is, but I think you'll find it fascinating. And feel free to chat things that you like and that you think are useful. Here's Susie.
So what we're now going to do is answer question number 2. We're going to go back to the text and answer the following questions. What do you notice about the author's word choice and imagery? How do those choices impact the reader? I want you to focus on paragraphs 2, 4, and 7. Let me synthesize what I'm seeing. A majority of you talked about how his author's craft moves demonstrate how dangerous the conditions were. Gap I'm noticing is that we all basically said very similar things. And John, I want to push us to come up with a different interpretation. So I'm going to highlight some text, and then I'm going to ask you to Zoom chat me what you notice. All right. So in paragraph 2, Lariah highlighted that their knuckles were getting swollen. Their hands also started to have cuts. In paragraph 4, Lariah highlighted that the acid is eating their fingers off. Now, a piece of evidence that I don't think I saw anyone really highlight was in paragraph 7, where, take a look, sometimes the fertilizer man would fall into the vats. I'm going to ask you to participate. What would happen once they would fall into the vats?
If they were to fall into the vats, if they were to fall into the vats, they would get hurt, or they'll be fished out, right? And they'll go back to work.
They would get fished out, and then they would go back to work. Angel?
I wanted to respectfully disagree with you when you said that they would be fished out and would have to go back to work. No, sometimes when they fell in, they would get, like, stuck for a couple days because people would forget about them. And then they would get shipped out, and sometimes people would end up eating them.
Hold on. I just saw some of our faces go, what? Our eyes got really big all of a sudden. Angel, go ahead and mute yourself. Let's go back to the text one more time.
I'm going to pause the video there because I think there are a couple of things that have come out of it already that you've probably caught that are pretty important. So one thing that's happening here is students are seeing each other's ideas, right? They see each other's writing, and so they get to react to each other. And another thing is that everybody is answering the question because they're asked to write, and so it just keeps them engaged in the thinking. And the writing causes their thinking to be more rigorous, and it allows her to check for understanding. And it actually tells her quite a lot, that they missed the gist of this paragraph. If I'd been able to pause the video, I would have shown you what students wrote there, but they wrote things like this. The author uses his craft to show us that the situation in the factory is bad. They got the gist of it, but they didn't really get the kicker there. This is also a video, though, about systems and routines. We know that procedures and routines, consistent ways of doing things, are so powerful in our bricks and mortar classroom, and they're also really important online. And so one of the systems, one of the most mundane systems, is camera visible. Your camera must be on so we can connect and see each other, and I can know what's happening to you. And in fact, it's the camera that's so critical here because she sees the shock on her students' faces when they realize what's happened in this passage. And they can see the shock on each other's faces. And so that connects them to the experience of the book. And so hopefully you've noticed throughout the videos that we've been watching how many consistent systems and routines there are, even for language. I'll pause this video now to do what's next. We're opening with an introductory slide or screen at the very beginning. Here's what we're going to be doing. Get your materials together. Here's what you'll need. Those are all procedures and routines to make sure that we're all locked in for the learning and we're as productive as we can be. I'm a little bit short on time here, so I'm going to scooch ahead to a couple of more quick clips that I think can be useful if we have enough time. I have about 2 minutes left. I may go a couple minutes over. If you have to go, of course, feel free to, but if you want to stick around to see a few more videos, I'll stay. So the next video I'm going to show you, I'm not going to show you all of it, but I'm going to show you some of it. It's about the key idea of dissolving the screen. And this is a phrase that we use to refer to connecting with students and letting them know that we still have a relationship, but grounding that relationship in the content. And so the more that we can do that, the more we're going to be successful. Again, this connects the idea that students often give up on online learning and check out because they just don't feel connected. And so we're going to see a group of teachers here doing a really beautiful job, I think, of dissolving the screen and making students feel connected to them through the work of study. So hopefully you'll find at least something you can steal from a couple of these. I may not have time to show you the whole video, but I think even the beginning of it you'll really enjoy.
Hey team, Mr. Reed back with you here, ready to jump into Chapter 5. Chapter 4 was pretty interesting, especially the part where Scout finds some chewing gum in the knot in the Radley's tree, and then she ate it. Is she crazy? That's where Boo Radley lives, and he might eat neighborhood cats. Who knows what he might do to a piece of gum? Obviously, she turns out okay in the end, so then we have these other questions to ask. Is he communicating with her? Is he trying to lure her into his house? This Boo Radley mystery is deepening by the minute. Before we jump into chapter 5, though, let's make sure that we are set up. The first thing you have to do, as always, is open your...
We're translating verbal expressions. The objective is students will be able to translate a verbal expression into an algebraic expression. So you're given some words, and you got to translate it into an algebraic expression. And then it says students will be able to identify the number of terms in a polynomial or function and interpret the parts for the quantities they represent. So I'm going to give you this polynomial, and you got to tell me about all the parts. Okay? What do they mean? All right. First things first, just like in the other class, you all have a do now. So this video is about to pause, and I want you to put in your answers, number 1, 2, 3, and then the stamp it. So I'm pausing right now.
Now, I know there are so many other ways to solve this, so go ahead and solve it on your own today. 28 taking away 15 to show me that final answer of 13. And so here's the challenge for tomorrow. If you want to be featured in tomorrow's story problem, write down your answer, show us your strategy, and the first person to show a strategy or comment below will be featured in tomorrow's story problem. Okay, great. Thank you so much, friends.
So today's problem is...
I think I'll pause it there. Rachel comes back, the teacher there. At the end, she says to students, if you send me your story problem, I'll make you the feature of the problem tomorrow. And so she comes back the next day, and Joshua, who did a problem about Legos, gets to be featured. So again, this idea of these are teachers sitting by themselves in their living rooms, talking to their computers, but they make it feel alive for students. And it's so compelling, and you can feel it here, what a big difference it makes. So just to recap some of the things that we've talked about, thank you so much for those of you who stayed on for a little extra. We want to make sure that we use pause points constantly in our lessons to engage students in different ways. We want to make sure that we've got strong systems and routines so students know how to be successful. We want to dissolve the screen so that we connect with students, particularly asynchronously, and our directions are really clear. And then when we're synchronous, we want to do everything we can to cause students to interact with us and their peers through cold call, turn and talk, stop and jot, chatting into the chat function on Zoom, perhaps, or even just writing on a piece of paper. Anyway, these are some of the things that my team and I have learned by studying teachers online during the fall. We've continued this work, and so I just want to end by saying thank you. There is no denying that this is a hard time to be a teacher, but it's also a very, very important time to be a teacher. There's a lot of uncertainty, but the one certainty is that our kids need us, and they need us to be as good as we can. Look for the book, Teaching in the Online Classroom. It's a bunch of videos like this discussed by myself and my team. Hopefully the electronic version will be out in August and the paper copy in September. And meanwhile, if you want, we post lots of videos and tips for online teaching now at the Teach Like a Champion blog. You can see the address on your screen, and that's my Twitter handle there at the bottom if you want to follow and keep in touch and keep studying teaching together. Thanks again for all that you do, and best of luck this year.